The Modi government managed to get the reservation bill passed within just 2 days. Even the most critical opponents of the BJP quietly fell in line when it came to this proposal. Details of who exactly would get this 10% quota are fuzzy, though there are several source-based reports that quote an 8 lakh threshold of family income to qualify. The bill leaves the criteria to governments, and this can be changed from time to time. It is, of course, no mere coincidence that this bill has been pushed through just months before the next general elections. On the face of it, the Modi government seems to have delivered a please-all formula. Reservation for backward castes intact and more reservations for the poor among the rest. How will it work, though, in the polls? To speak on this, I'm joined now by Sadanand Dhume, resident fellow at American Enterprise Institute. Senior political analyst Javed Ansari joins us as well. We will also be joined by Manisha Priyam, political analyst. Welcome to all of you on the show. Mr. Dhume, let me start by asking you what you think of it. I don't think there's any great doubt that this is a pre-poll pitch. Now that everyone is on board, does it, in a sense, dilute the power of what the BJP would have hoped to gain from it? Because they can't really say that, look, there are parties opposing it and who are anti-poor.
Thanks. Let me quickly, divide that into two parts. I mean, the first is the policy itself. And I have to lay out on the table that I'm not a fan of this policy because I'm not a fan of quotas in general. Now to your main question, which is the impact, and I think the only honest answer is that we don't know, right? It could be that people do take to this the way the BJP is hoping, which is that groups that have not been covered by quotas in the past, and particularly the so-called economically weaker sections of the so-called upper caste, all feel very happy, and nobody else feels the worse for it. I mean, that's what they're hoping. But I think there's a more complex way of looking at this, which is that once you open this can of worms, which is reservation, once you start talking about the divisions of society that we're supposed to heal, but in fact have been perpetuated by quotas for all these years, we're entering terrain that is fundamentally not in the BJP's favor. So what looks like a bold masterstroke, in their words, may actually end up being a boomerang.
Masterstroke or boomerang, Mr. Ansari, where do you stand on this? Remember, it's also being pitched as this is not just for forward castes. It's the first time you're looking at a section of society on the basis of their income. So it's caste agnostic in that sense. Do you think that that will appeal to a section of voters?
Look, the jury is still out. If the past is anything to go by, the UPA government, just before the 2014 elections, had earmarked a quota for Jats. Jats went and overwhelmingly voted, along with all the other communities, in favor of Mr. Narendra Modi. Mr. Hooda, Bhupinder Singh Hooda, the former Chief Minister of Haryana, had done something similar. He'd gone in for reservations. It didn't help him in any way. So these last-minute measures, I'm not so sure if they will succeed. This is not a masterstroke. This is certainly a desperate move, and that too coming from a man of the likes of Mr. Narendra Modi, who has all along opposed this kind of thing. But given the stark realities, given the fact that the opposition is now, there's a Gathbandhan in the works, and he faces the prospect of a one-to-one fight against the BJP in 60 to 70% of the seats. This is to forestall that. This is to try and save something. And this is also a panic reaction to the results of the last three assembly elections, wherein upper castes also voted for the Congress. Upper castes, whom the BJP would like to believe was their vote bank, a large section of it voted for the Congress. So this is an attempt to try and wrest something back for themselves. Whether this succeeds or not, like I said earlier, the jury is still out. Everybody has supported it, but it has. Mr. Sadanand Dhume is right.
That's the thing, Mr. Ansari. Everybody has supported it. Everybody has supported it. Those entire 2 days of debate in both houses was simply, we have no problem with the bill.
if this measure had been announced 6 months ago, or maybe 6 months after the elections, you would have seen half a dozen parties come out openly opposed to this. Now, because elections are just a couple of months down the road, people are supporting it, some openly, a lot of them grudgingly. But you can foresee the state of affairs to come in the days ahead. Parties have now demanded that now that the 50% glass ceiling has been broken, the quota level SCs should be given, and OBC should be given quotas, reservations in proportion to their population. Their population has grown considerably compared to the last census, and therefore their share should be increased. The DMK and AIDMK have an absolutely different take. I heard the AIDMK MP in the Rajya Sabha saying that you should have 90% quotas. So where will all this lead to, and where are the jobs?
I want to welcome Manisha Priyam to the show. Ms. Priyam, the first basic question being whether you think the 10% reservation for economically weaker sections within the general category will pay off rich dividends for the BJP and Narendra Modi in the polls. Is there any way of knowing whether enough people will lap this up and it will help them electorally?
So certainly the government thinks that it's going to benefit it electorally. Without that, this step would not have come at this hour. Literally in the last working session of the parliament that this government has to its discretion, so it would have come somewhere early enough, soon after they were elected in 2014. But clearly this is with an eye to the polls, undeniably so. But I think the electoral dividends will be reaped only if people can understand that this is likely to be implemented and that this will give them benefit. Because people also understand very clearly, remember, that all of this can go first into the legal domain and can be questioned legally. People also understand that the 50% ceiling cannot be breached. But more importantly, remember, every time you take an affirmative action step, you need to justify it. The Constitution provides for reservation for socially and educationally backward classes. So you need to justify how the upper caste economically poor come under the category of the SEBC. That's what the Constitution looks at, the socially and educationally backward. The Constitution looks at it not as a measure of providing jobs. The Constitution looks at it as a measure of realizing the right to equality. Some people are not there in the race equal, so you give them a greater benefit to be able to achieve the
counter argument is that the Constitution has been amended under the rules that are available. And now, in its amended form, the Constitution does recognize this as well. And
so the Constitution, if it stands amended, see, no, you can't amend the Constitution to whatever you like. And constitutional amendments have to adhere to what are called the basic tenets of the Constitution. So the Constitution amendment, if it has happened, then it will have to amend tabula rasa and say that now onwards, the government will look at economic criteria. The economic criteria cannot be a top-up to caste criteria, right? So there is an anomaly to the way you're proceeding. It doesn't exist. And in terms of implementation, remember, the country has a clear list, a schedule of scheduled castes, a schedule of scheduled tribes. What we don't have is a list of upper castes. So before this claim can be made, the listing of upper castes will need to be completed. So between the policy promulgation, even through a constitutional amendment, and its realization, if electoral dividends have to be reaped, there is many a slip between the cup and the lip. If people understand that this is not something that's coming by very soon, like in the Mandal Commission, the benefits were there to reap for. There was the Mandal Commission report sitting on this. So there is a dissonance really to the way this constitutional amendment has been put about without adequate homework foregrounding the constitutional amendment itself. Remember, nothing can be implemented without the prior homework having been done, and that needs to be done. There's no argument to the fact that yes, it's a constitutional amendment, the legislature is supreme in enacting constitutional amendments. It's done this using its right, it's put its statement forward.
This is the first time that in the Constitution you've opened the door to reservation in private entities, private educational entities, whether they're aided or unaided. Where are the educational seats? Really will be the question. Everyone knows government jobs are few. And do you think that people will take some time to realize that any of this to even happen will take some time? But meanwhile, the message is already out there that, you know, you have opportunities you may not have had before.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if that simple message is going to last for all of 3 or 3.5 months. You know, these are things that matter very much and very directly to people. And so these are things that they are much more likely to inform themselves about than just, you know, any old other measure. And people are not fools. People can be quite sophisticated about their own lives, even if they aren't highly educated. I agree with you that this precedent of opening the private sector is actually a very dangerous precedent that has not been paid enough attention to. The other thing that I think should be paid more attention to is the fact that as Mr. Ansari pointed out, that once you breach that 50% mark, once you sort of, you know, I know Tamil Nadu was always an exception, but that was a special case. Once you kind of say that, well, you know, I don't really care what the Supreme Court has said, I don't care about these precedents, this is not the thing that is staying my hand, then essentially you've declared, you know, open season. And my worry here is that you could end up, and this is not fear-mongering, this is completely realistic, you could end up with a situation where much of the country resembles places like Tamil Nadu today, where basically 7 out of 10 people is, you know, whether you're in a civil service job or whether you're studying for medicine or whatever, you know, is there for some part of their ascribed identity that they were born with. And I have to say that for a democracy, this is something that is very sad.
What about the 8 lakh figure, Sadanand? Because, like I said, it's been pegged to the OBC creamy layer. They've said that we can decide on income levels or any other economic indicators. You've basically left it vague enough for any government, state or centre to do whatever they want. Perhaps that's why every party has lapped up and relished the opportunity to trot this out every time. Do you think that that makes it attractive enough? 80–90% of the general quota could possibly be part of this reservation. So everyone's happy.
It doesn't. I mean, again, I mean, if they're betting on people really not scrutinizing anything, right? They're betting on people having the attention span of gnats who spend their time and get their information only from WhatsApp and Twitter. If that's the case, then maybe, right? Then then the headline is simply, hey, look, you're entitled to reservation now. But the reality is that when 95% or 99% or whatever of the country is covered, then it basically means no one new has been covered. All that you've really done is stick it to those few people who do make more than 8 lakhs and may want, you know, so you leave them feeling really upset. And I agree that their numbers don't count, but there's still a sort of, you know, moral and ethical issue attached to quotas. And then the rest of the people wake up and they realize that, well, you know, actually, I'm not much better off than I was yesterday.
You know, the whole plan has so many gaping flaws in it that I don't know how politicians and representatives of people debated it for 2 days without asking some of these questions. But Mr. Ansari, that's the other question. If it's in private education, even if you have quotas, some of these institutes have very high fees. So are these fees going to be subsidized as well? You may get in because of your quota, but you still have to pay. Can you pay a high fee if your income is at a lower level? I mean, like Sadanand said, people are probably not even asking these questions. They're just saying, oh, great, there's more reservation.
You know, I don't think that government has really thought this through. They didn't apply their mind. They're really just looking at it from the political angle. Look, there's another aspect. On the floor of Parliament, demands Mr. Ramvilas Paswan, who's a minister of the Union Cabinet, he says, please extend these reservations to judicial services. Now, what is going to be left then? If there's going to be reservation in everything, in judiciary and in you know, amongst doctors, amongst every, what will be left? There are so many loopholes, like you said. This is for the underprivileged, for people who can't afford it. Yet, if they want to go and get admission in some private institution in Pune or somewhere else, they have to pay through the nose. Whereas So and if you can pay through the nose, then why should you be getting the reservation? So there are so many contradictions. This has thrown up more questions than answers. A 9-judge constitution bench clearly laid out in the case of Mandal that you can't breach the 50% barrier. This government, in its wisdom, there are certain legal luminaries there who believe that they can circumvent that and a way will be found. Now, what more? I mean, how a 9-judge bench, a constitution bench has ruled. How on earth are you going to circumvent that?
Even if this faces judicial challenge, that will take time. All of that will take its own time. Sadanand, Manisha Priyam is arguing that unless people see an immediacy in implementation, it's not going to be enough to, show them this lollipop and say it'll come at some point. They'll have to see some action on ground. Do you think the expectation will be that high in just the next few months?
Well, before I get to that, let me just point out a little bit of a contradiction that the BJP faces in this. The real reason that some members of its base are enthusiastic about this is what the previous speaker alluded to. The idea that the criteria for reservation is shifting from caste to economics, right? But that is precisely the criteria that would be most disturbing or most alarming to the existing beneficiaries of caste-based reservation. So in a way, the BJP is trying to be too clever by half, where it expects one section of the population to sort of be exultant because they see the end of the old reservation order around the corner. I don't think any such thing is going to happen, but some people, they think some people are naive enough to believe that. But then at the very same time, you want another section of the population to feel that, well, no, this is not going to change the existing order at all. And if anything, this is just an embellishment or an addition that will not affect it. And this innate contradiction on such a volatile issue, I think this is the reason why I'm not at all convinced that this is going to pay off for them electorally.
Ms. Priyam, what about the part where the opposition has also fallen in line? Does it work for both or negate any benefit for both sides, which is the BJP as well as the opposition parties? Because the moment the BJP says, hey, we bought this, so opposition party says we helped as well.
Yeah, so the opposition at this point of time, if you see on many issues, there is a cloning. In a sense, if you see, Rahul Gandhi also does Hindutva. He goes and tells people his caste, his religion, his gotra, or whatever, his Janeu or whatever else. So in a sense, no political party at this point of time wants to alienate cleavages. Moment you do that, all of those who you alienate will be taken up by the BJP and it will form an impossible arithmetic. Remember, it even ruled Jammu and Kashmir through an impossible arithmetic. And that's a lesson that's gone down to political parties. Secondly, in many political parties, if you see, that were erstwhile Mandalite parties, what happened in the last few elections was that while the leadership and the core remained, the vote bank remained of the Bahujan Samaj or of the other backward castes, these parties were in reality now a rainbow coalition of the poorer amongst the upper castes stuck in rural areas. Mayawati, for example, had an important coalition of the Brahmins in her party. So she became a Brahmin Muslim Dalit party. The Yadavs, for example, in the Samajwadi party had a coalition of other castes, most importantly the Rajputs. Now even somebody called Lalu Yadav, when he won those elections, he had some significant support of the Rajputs as well as part of the Bhumiyars, even though the Bhumiyars were opposed to him. But more importantly, Nitish Kumar and Shivraj Singh Chauhan represent this important phase when the social coalition that has backed their agenda of developmentalism has been a social coalition of the backwards and the forwards. So this combination use of the BJP is a lesson that's gone down to the Mandalite parties, and at this point they understand that they can't break the rules of combination politics. It's no longer the clear politics of Agda and Pichda. So if you notice, in the entire spectrum, barring Lalu Yadav's party of the RJD, where his member in the Rajya Sabha rose on his feet to still applaud his leader and talk about how it needs to be just about the politics of the pichdas. Most political parties, including Professor Ram Gopal Yadav or anybody else who I heard from the regional parties, they said we have differences, but we're going to support the bill, which means combination politics is the order of the day in state politics.
You know, in fact, it's telling the way every party supported the bill. They had various reasons. What is the timing? What is the process, etc. But everyone supported the bill because no one can afford to be seen anti-poor. Mr. Ansari, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, the point I was making is Sadanand summed it up beautifully. This could boomerang amongst the lower caste because there already is a feeling. Remember, Mr. Mohan Bhagwat on the eve of the Bihar elections made a statement saying that you need to relook this question of reservation for OBCs. Lalu Yadav and Nitish Kumar, they picked it up and they went to hammer and tongs. And in Bihar, I covered that election extensively. There was a huge gang up. This rebounded, exploded in BJP's face. Already the RJD and the others, even those who supported it on the floor of the house, but privately on the streets, they have begun to say this. The parties who basically depend on the OBC and the Dalits and the minority vote base, they say this has the potential to cut into. This is actually a part. They are implementing Mr. Mohan Bhagwat's dream, which is to cut Mohan Bhagwat's master plan, which is to cut into the reservation for the backwards and for Dalits. So when this campaign also catches on, so for the BJP to believe that just because they've announced all the upper caste vote and everybody else will fall into it kitty, it won't happen that naturally. There's another aspect to it, and this could also, and we'll see this unfolding in the days and weeks ahead.
But can they do that? Sadanand, just a point from you on how the opposition parties have played this. They could have taken, natural adversarial position and had a host of reasons to shoot it down. But they very quickly seem to have realized that there's no point doing that. Will it work for opposition parties to have played into the BJP's hand, or have they in a sense nullified what the BJP might have hoped for?
No, I think Mr. Ansari raises a very astute point over there. Don't just go by the surface level acceptance, right? On the surface, you have no choice but to say, okay, I'm for it, right? Who is going to say that I'm opposed to the poor people? Because immediately the BJP would turn that around and say, well, you hate the poor. But below the surface, it's possible for your messaging to be much more sophisticated. And this one brings me back to my original point, which is that they have effectively opened up the terrain for a discussion about caste and reservation, and that is not terrain that works for the BJP. And we must remember that as recently as 2014, the BJP came to office with the first single-party majority in a generation because it consolidated Hindu groups across caste, whether it was the OBCs, whether it was the Dalits, whether it was the so-called upper caste, you name it. And now they find themselves instead playing this very traditional slice and dice game, even though ostensibly they're trying to move away from it. And I think that is terrain that fundamentally does not favor them.
Ms. Priyam, final word from you on how this will all play out. Will the BJP have to add on to this to make it work for them? Because clearly it will not be enough just to have this, momentous support and passing of the bill. The message will need to be sent down as the time closes in for campaigning.
Well, I think both yes and no, because the BJP traditionally has been a party that's had a solid support of the upper caste. To the upper caste, it's signaled that it's not a party that believes only in an OBC politics. Remember, when Mr. Narendra Modi went to the elections last time, his caste origins were discussed adequately, and he himself spared no opportunity to bring home the point that he belonged to a particular caste. As he said, I remember, it was the Ganchi Teli caste from amongst the OBCs, Pichde Varg ka hoon. Now, I think that era is clearly over. The BJP traditionally as a party has been a party that's not been averse to the politics of the upper caste. So the OBC-ness of that moment is all gone. And in a sense, there is a retreat to the old format where the BJP is not averse to being seen as somebody that can give goodies to the upper caste as well. So this will lead to, even the announcement will lead to a certain kind of, upsurge in the morale of the cadre that belongs to the upper caste and backs the BJP in the Mandal heartland, in the Hindi heartland. Therefore, one will see very, very trenched battles which will have underpinnings of caste undertones on both sides. So the BJP has definitely made its cadres and its old loyal supporters battle ready, even with the announcement, even though the goodies may come at a subsequent point of time.
You know, the risk of having a hold all, please all kind of a strategy is either you please everyone or you end up upsetting everyone. It's definitely a risk that the BJP has taken. We'll have to see how it pans out. We asked you what you think in our Twitter poll and whether you think that this will pay off for the BJP. Will it help them get middle class votes? Well, it was a close decision, really. 55% say yes, 45% say no. You can keep coming in with your views on this subject. We'd be happy to hear from you.